great to see we have some other remote OGs in the audience, but it's true, my journey really did begin 25 years ago because my mum actually worked from home in the 90s, quite unusually then, and I finished my degree dissertation on one of those big jelly bean iMacs. But my first experience of working full-time from home really came along when we managed to have a bit of a cliched thing called a millennium baby. And I didn't want to go back to somebody else's office after that. So basically, I've got 25 years to cover in 15 minutes. I'm going to do my best with that and have a look at, I'm going to distill it down to these three lenses about what's changed in remote work, what that can teach us about the future, and the transition that this whole movement has been through, that we are all a part of, and it's so exciting. So starting with the cultural aspects of remote work then. What's changed? Well, first of all, it's important to realize that remote work at the turn of the millennium meant work from home. There was no digital nomadism. Basically, remote work meant being tethered to the wall by an Ethernet cable and several big beige boxes. So it was quite isolating, I'll be perfectly honest. There was no Nomad X, there was no Repeople, there was no running remote. It was just me and a newborn and these big beige boxes. That's because remote work was weird. I didn't know anybody else who worked from home at that point. Everybody surrounding me was either a commuter or a stay-at-home mum. It was so strange that this photo was actually taken for a local magazine. That's Millennium Toddler. I just thought you'd like to see the massive monitor. I think the headline of the article was something like, "Local woman has office in house." It was that weird and unusual at the time. You can't see in that photo the great big tower computer. Even laptops were massive then, and they were out of reach financially. You can't see the fax machine, the franking machine, but it was actually ideal for a stealth project which I was setting up at the time. We didn't use the word startup. So, clicker not working? Oh, there we go. Yeah, work from home was weird. So it was even weirder some years after that. We moved out of the city to the suburbs. It was still weird, so we moved to Spain, basically, for a change. But that was quite an epic journey at the time. At the end of 2008, in the middle of the financial crisis, we decided we were going to go and live somewhere else. Actually, over time, and in fact, when we got to Spain, there was more acceptance of remote work in the sense that there were more small businesses and self-employed people, family businesses. And of course, as the technology evolved over time, it became less unusual, even though there were still not that many people working from home, until, of course, everybody was working from home. And at that point, prior to that, I was writing and consulting about transitioning to remote work for businesses and teams back when that was a change management process. And then, of course, March 2020, all of that process went out the window, grab a laptop and go home. So culturally, that was a massive shift. And of course, now we're coming out of that time. There's actually a bit of a backlash against working from home as a mandate. And I'm not a digital nomad. I've always worked from home. I love having a home base to travel from. But it's quite interesting how that has changed. The only other thing to mention on the cultural lens is, of course, when we moved to Spain, we were Europeans and we could go anywhere we like. And there was a big change after that. But that's a whole other keynote. We won't go there. Let's move on to look at the technology and the connection and the communication. When we started off, we had to put a new phone line in our house so that we could be on the internet all the time and still use the house phone. So we moved from that. Then we got ISDN, which is basically just slightly faster phone. Finally, we got broadband at home. Then, of course, we moved to Spain and back to 1 megabyte connection. So that was no fun. And we were both working from home on 1 megabyte. To actually talk to each other as a team, we started off on IRC, which is, for anybody not old enough, was a gaming back channel. So that's a little bit ironic, because what are we all using now? But we didn't have that then. We moved from IRC to MSN, and we got emojis, and then we moved to Skype and then to Slack, because by then I'd grown quite a big team. Video conferencing, it used to have a capital letter, like internet did even before that. We invested in this huge, expensive video conferencing suite to try and do meetings, and it never worked properly. Everybody was frozen and falling out. Clients hated it. Can we just phone you? So we were early adopters, what can I say? Data was another interesting issue because I was actually running a research database project, and it started off basically at the point that I wanted to move to Spain, or even before that, when I wanted to get people out of my office in my house and send them to work at their own homes. We didn't use the word decentralization then, in the same way we didn't use the word startup, but I knew I needed to become not the middle of it, but a node, and so we moved all of that to a big data center. We didn't even have the cloud then, despite the fact we were in British weather. And it actually mattered where your data center was in terms of proximity to where people were working. It was that non-advanced. So I managed to get all that done, and I had a laptop instead of the Sucking Great box, and then I could move to Spain. Or so I thought. Straightforward and easy, right? So let's talk about the people. At first, I was working from home, in my home, and when I started hiring people, they worked in my home, because that was simply the easiest way to communicate. Gradually, the team became too big for that, and it got to the point where I didn't want these people in my house anymore. At one point, I had 4 people working I had an office unit at the end of the garden, and we had, health and safety inspector came around and looked at the bathroom and said, you have to have a sign in your bathroom saying the hot water tap might be hot. Because, I tried to employ people who were smart enough for that, but eventually I wanted all these people out of my house because we were going to move country anyway, even though we hadn't told everybody then. So that was interesting. I had to hire people before there was really any knowledge about hiring and growing a remote team. And I needed people who had specific industry experience, but the one thing I could never do and specify in hiring was that they had to have work from home or remote work experience, because nobody had it, back a decade or so ago. It was difficult. We didn't always get it right. I tried to look for people who had experience of long-term self-management in some way, independent study, or they'd trained for a marathon or written a book or something. I had to try and find these clues in their CV that they could manage projects autonomously, asynchronously from home. So that was an interesting challenge. When we moved abroad, that was a good one. We had it all planned. We'd managed to let our house. We'd sorted out the schools, the housing, and everything else. And it was literally about a month before we were going to go to Spain. And I thought, I can just be a contractor. And then suddenly the parent company accountant popped up and said, well, hang on a minute. She's the managing director. She can't just go and be a contractor in another country. Because we didn't have EORs. We didn't have any kind of solutions. We had no Estonian e-residency, for example. So, we just had to go then, and I said, all right, I'll move to Spain. If you insist, I'll set up a limited company in Spain. That can't be that difficult. Right, but that's what I had to do. I had to set up an SAL in Spain to consult to the company in the UK, and then travel to the UK to minute board meetings or something, because they were so scared. As it went on, this turned into a source of tension between me and the parent company, in fact, because once I'd figured that out, after that, I just wanted to hire the best person for any role, wherever they were in the world. Whereas the parent company wanted to hire the people that were easiest and ideally UK residents. But for me, that was something clicked, and I realized you could do this, even though it was cumbersome and expensive, and it truly unlocked a world of global talent. So now what? Obviously, we've come a long way in that time, and we have to look towards the future. Remote is normal. Just looking around this room, everybody's doing it. It's no longer a weird thing that I have to explain to people. Remote now embraces so many different ways of working and living. I'm not a digital nomad. I never will be. I have a home base I love to travel from. Obviously, I've now got to the stage where Millennium Baby and her sister can be left alone at home, even though we're checking in on them quite a bit. But I'm going to actually bring Millennium Baby's dad with me this time, and we can leave them. They're both technically adults. So remote has become normalized. Getting online and connecting, it was the bane of our lives when we first moved to Spain. Whenever we went to look at a rental property, the first thing would be, right, speed test. Are we on line of sight for that WiMAX over there? Why can't we? Before we'd sign any lease, we had to test the internet because both of us needed to work. Theoretically, we could both be on a video call, and the kids upstairs trying to stream British telly. So it was a real problem. But I think it was about 2017, 2018 that Telefonica broadband rolled out to where we lived. And that was it, the problem went away. But it's important to remember that sort of hygiene factor. When it doesn't work, it really does mess you up. And we've now got to the stage where we can also get online with tiny little devices. My first laptop was nearly as big and heavy as the tower system that I had in the home office. So, we really have come an incredibly long way with 4G, 5G. Compliance, obviously, that's been a huge change over time. You no longer, if you want to go and move to another country, you don't have to set up a limited company there just to work for one in another place. 5 years ago, I became an Estonian e-resident when I needed another limited company as a freelancer, because there was no way I was doing an SALA again, right? I'm still trying to close down the first one, I think, and still paying for that. So I set up my business in Estonia. Now, Estonian e-residency, I'm an official spokesperson for the scheme now and delighted to answer any questions about it, but they've just passed the 100,000 e-resident mark. People all over the world are using Estonia's business infrastructure to operate limited companies whilst they migrate, they travel, they become expats, they become nomads, or they just work from a country where setting up a limited company is a total pain. So there's so many solutions now for that hiring. The future, then, gives us so much optionality. That is what, for me, the future, and the reason that I live and work the way I do, has always been about choices, about creating options. I spent a very short time of my life being a traditional office worker. I did have a taste of it, just so I knew what I was leaving behind. And the lack of choice there, the turning up on a certain time and place and doing certain activity, I don't understand how so many people still have that as the way they live and work. When we have a choice to be somewhere like here, to be in Agete, to go wherever we want in the world, that's what I want for my daughters, is that choice. It's the fact that they've never seen me go out to work, go out to an office. But I believe for all the parents in the room, for little Carolina, the fact that children see you work is really important. You know, I had no idea what my dad did for a living, really. He sort of went somewhere in the car with a briefcase. I'd no idea what happened in offices. Whereas my kids have always seen me work. For the last 6 years, they've seen me freelancing. So they've actually seen the direct connection between the effort and the reward. I need to finish this thing through the night or through the weekend, and then next weekend we're going to have a treat because there's a little bit more money coming in, and so on. So they've never seen me go out to work. I've never had a photo on my desk of that millennium baby and her sister in the office because they've always been in the office. Sometimes I didn't want them in the office. You know, they had to learn to respect the signs on the door, especially when I started podcasting. But they've always been just to hand, and you know, they've managed to see what the work is. At the moment, the oldest one is, well, she's seen me through her lifetime. She's seen me work from home when she was at home with me with an au pair, running into the office, tripping over cables. She's seen me build an international team, scale it. She's seen us up sticks and move to another country. She's seen me actually burn all that down and go freelance. That, again, is a whole other keynote. She's seen me build that freelance business up to the point that we can now travel and do what we want with our lives. And she is studying remotely from home. And then what does she go and do? What does she want more than anything else in her life? A job. So I don't know where we've gone wrong. But my hope for her and her sister and for all of our children is that we can live as remote workers, completely disconnect the work from the place we do it, and embrace the whole planet and the whole community, the projects that people like Gonzalo and Nacho and other people are building, and that they'll be able to embrace that life as completely normal. They'll never realise how hard we fought to get there, but I hope that they will appreciate and enjoy every minute of it. And that's it. I managed to do 25 years in, 14 minutes. So... We even have time for one or two questions. 2 questions.
Are there any questions?
Even better, no questions.
Yeah, don't be shy.
If you want to connect with me, you can hear about Remote Work Europe, which is the next thing I'm building. Hopefully to be that sort of middle of the funnel that Gonzalo was talking about between the digital nomads and the local communities. Please connect with me. That's got all the links to all the things. So, great.
Thank you, Maya.
My pleasure.